Hi there, my name is Hippie Hunter and welcome to my channel. So we're going to go over today, we're going to look at the three different trees that there are for tanks in the game. Right now we have American, German, and Russian tanks. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and just give a quick rundown of each different tank tree, explain their weaknesses, explain their strengths, and just give a basic overall general guide to playing tanks. And so when you first start this game, you probably go for planes, you might see the tanks, or you might go straight for the planes if you're a World of Tanks player. A lot of the things in this game are a lot different than World of Tanks, and also the game itself is kind of difficult to understand coming in without any experience. I'm not going to touch too much on a lot of these stuff, very beginner stuff. So there are good guides, and I know that NTAC has some good guides for very new beginner players. But this is more like, let's say you've gotten a feel for things and you're like, well, I want to get into tanks. Which nation do I pick? What's their strengths? What is their weaknesses? Things like that. So let's get started. So first we have the American tank tree. Now, American tanks are interesting because they were just added recently, and a disclaimer is that I'm going to do an update video on this when this happens, that the US tank destroyers are not in this line yet. That's something I will come back to. So first going off, let's take a look at the different tanks for America. So when you go into your research tree, tanks are usually organized in one or two particular ways. So normally when you look at the tree, it's going to end up like this. So each different tier, or each different column, is a different type of tanks. So for example, for US, you have your light tanks on this column, you have your medium tanks here, and you have your heavies here, and your flak trucks here, and then you have your premium tanks, which tanks that you have to buy over in this column. Now, one thing I want to point out is that each of these different tanks work out differently. So light tanks, they're exactly as they sound. They're tanks, they're light, they're usually generally fast. They don't generally have the large caliber guns. Their guns can be good though. Medium tanks, really good at flanking, general all around decent, things like that. Then there's heavy tanks. Now, besides the most heavy tank tiers, Russia has the earliest heavy tanks in the game in terms of battle rating. But most heavy tanks start off usually in tier 3. There are some, like 1 or 2 tier 2 heavy tanks, but all in all, the first tank you get in the heavy tank line isn't usually going to be an actual heavy tank. So don't be expecting, you know, like, why am I not getting a heavy tank if I just start reaching the heavy tank line? That's something to bring up. But the next thing I want to bring up is there's, so let's go through the lines that's not here as well, which is the tank destroyer line. So the American tank destroyer line is interesting because it's composed of very fast vehicles like the M18 Hellcat, things that aren't in the game yet. Those are not traditional tank destroyers. Traditional tank destroyers are something that don't have a turret. Basically, their gun faces forward. They're usually cheaper to produce in real life, which is not really a factor in the game. They are also generally, you can usually mount somewhat larger guns on tank destroyers than you can on regular tanks because they don't have a turret. But the downside is, of course, the tank doesn't have a turret, and they usually generally have very good frontal armor but very poor side armor. So, looking at USA, what would we say their strengths and weaknesses are? Well, early tier USA is rather good. So one other thing that I also just want to make a side note about is that right now I have tier 5 Germany. I have pretty much every single tank except the Tiger E right now, and most of my experience is, if I don't have the tank, is based off me facing it as Germany, which I've played quite a few games of. So going through the American tanks are kind of a mixed bag. Early on at around late tier 1 and tier 2, they are really strong. Their tanks do rather well against pretty much anything they come against, and they're also rather good. Like, you know, they don't have any really bad drawbacks. I mean, the one thing you can say if you're thinking of a drawback for their earlier tier tanks is that their side armor is pretty bad. That's actually a factor that most American tanks share, is that they don't have that great side armor. The Pershings later on are alright, but we're not going to get to those yet. So moving down the line, American tanks are kind of okay at tier 3 around this area. Tier 4, they're very good, and tier 5, they're hard to play, but they're good. Overall, the general playstyle of America is a combination between mobility and speed, and abusing a lot of advantages. So, for example, a lot of American tanks have really fast turret rotation speeds, so they can engage multiple enemies at once, or they can, you know, shoot and scoot, they can move back and forth. They generally have very good responsiveness too. The thing though is that they don't usually have the greatest guns up until you reach, you know, tier 4, and even some of the early tier 4s aren't that great in terms of overall gun caliber. A lot of Another thing is that a lot of American tanks, besides the T-32 and the jumbos, they really aren't great at taking hits, and the early M4s for that matter. But overall, they're kind of a mixed bag. America's really great if you know how to play them, but they take a bit of time to get used to, and pretty much at every tier there is something that has a lot of armor that you're facing that also is a good gun, so it's like you're pretty evenly matched throughout. It's really you just have to have people fight on your terms, and your terms are, you know, not charging out in the middle of the field and fighting a tiger or something like that. But overall, American tanks are pretty good. They're missing some gameplay. As I said, the U.S. tank destroyers will probably fill in that hole where it kind of seems awkward at certain ranks because you don't have certain tanks in your team that kind of make the combo, your team makeup seem to combine rather well. If that makes sense. Then let's talk about their AA really quick. So American AAs are primarily, up until late tier, are composed of 50 caliber flak trucks, like this guy right here. Actually, let's go to him right now. And this guy as well. So a lot of them have some kind of 50 cals. This one has a cannon on it. The early tier of flak trucks from America are very good. They're really fast. They're very lightly armored, though. That's pretty much the same with all AA trucks. Overall, if I was to give their different types of tanks a score, I would give American light tanks 8 or 9 out of 10. They're all very good. Some of them are a little undergunned for their tier, but they make up for that with their speed and just how, you know, they don't cost that much in realistic battles point-wise. They're very easy to learn how to master. They can be hard to get extremely good at, but they're very easy to learn off the bat. And they're also really fun to play. I'd give them about an 8 out of 10. The American medium line is interesting. I'm also basing these scores more on enjoyment than, you know, strength. Like, I am factoring that in, but I think enjoyment is a big part in this game, and if you don't really enjoy something, then it's not really that fun. Next, I'd give the medium line for America. I'd give them probably a good 6 out of 10 to 7 out of 10. The reason why I give them that is because while they are really good, especially in the early tiers, their mid-game at tier 3 suffers where most players are, and their late game is okay. I mean, the M46 and the M47 are great when they face things that are, you know, lower than them or at them, but when they get put into higher tier matches or like an 8.0 game, well, M47 always gets 8.0 games, but when the M46 faces 8.0 games, their mediums just aren't that great late tier, which is something I think the tank destroyers will fix. American heavies. American heavies, the M43-105 used to be good. It's basically you need to really know what you're doing to do good at it now. M6A1 is okay. So this thing has a massive flat front plate where if you know where to shoot tigers, it's their giant front plate. This is the same thing, but it's a weaker tank, and you're facing tigers, so you can kind of see where that goes. M43-2, it's basically like a jumbo. I actually have the premium version of it. It's which is a jumbo. It's the Sherman Jumbo, which has a ton of frontal armor. The first one has this thing where you can't kill tigers, but they can't kill you. The second one is tigers. The Tiger E can kill you. The first, regular tigers can't kill you, and you can kill them from the front, at least at a distance. T-32, amazing tank. M103, insane tank in the good hands. It needs to be played well in order to do well with it, and I've seen so many players play this tank very poorly. It's amazing. It doesn't have that great armor up close, but the gun is insane. It's really, with America, it really comes down to how well you understand your tanks and how much time you take to figure things out with them. So overall, America heavy tanks, I'd give them about an 8 out of 10. Maybe once you get past the first like 2 or 3, I mean I'm gonna count this as a heavy just because it's in the heavy line. Once you get past the first 3, it's alright, so past that I'd give it a 9 out of 10. American flak trucks, I give them a 9 out of 10. They're really good for their tier. The early ones can destroy things in the low tier matches. They can actually kill tanks. But later tier ones can't kill tanks that effectively. They're very good for what they are. They're very fast. They're just not heavily armored, but you don't need armor if you have the speed to make up for it. So I'd give their anti-aircraft 9 out of 10. And then I'm going to make another video about airplanes and what you should bring in for ground forces in general. But let's move on to Germany. Alrighty. So, welcome to Germany. As you can see, I have pretty much every single tank in the trade, minus the Tiger E and the recently added Panzer IIIs and the Panzer IV. So, looking at Germany, you can see a little bit of a difference. First of all, they have a tank destroyer line, which is nice. And you might be thinking, which tiers or which column is their fast tanks or light tanks? America is the only one that has a dedicated light tank column. This column over here, this is actually not light tanks. These are Czech tanks, built by Czechoslovakia during the war, and they're in the German tech tree. I'm not sure when they make the international tech tree, if these are going to be moved or if these stay here, but I'd like them to stay just because they're nice. But these are really good tanks. Anyways, they're getting on. So first, as we were talking with the Czech tree, let's go through the different trees real quick. So first what we got with the Czech tanks is we got the Panzer 38Ts. These are alright. They're pretty good for their battle rating. They're nothing special. They're nothing, you know, great, but they are decent tanks. The Marder 3s are really good tanks. They're a tank destroyer, so if you see this, you look at, let me pull one of these guys up. These guys are basically your quintessential tank destroyer. They have a fixed turret that can rotate. It can go side to side a little bit. They don't have, as I said, they don't have a turret. Generally, I mean, the Marders are the exception because they don't have decent armor in the front. Generally, most tank destroyers have decent armor in the front for what they are. These guys don't have that much because they're basically they're basically like an early war tank with a larger gun on it. So these are pretty much tank destroyers. They're very weak, but they have insane guns for their battle rating, meaning that they're very good. And then the final Czech tank that you get is the Hetzer, which is one of my favorite tanks. This thing is really good for its tier. It's got great armor, it's got a great gun. You just need to play it well. Next we have the heavy line, or technically the German heavy line, starts off with a bunch of medium tanks with the Panzer IIIs. These are alright. I don't really recommend them outside of low tier. Panzer 3M's pretty fun, but that's about it. The other thing that I wanted to say about this is that the Panzer IIIs they can't really take that many hits, so I don't really like them that much. Some people love them, but they get you to the heavies, which are the Tigers. So the Tigers are the bread and butter of the heavy line. Tigers are really good overall. They're really strong if you know how to play them. Germany is interesting because they're like America, but a little bit different. They're a lot more popular than America. I think that might have changed a little bit since the American release. So there's a lot of people playing them, also because people love the Tigers. You need to know how to play them. You need to know their ballistics. You need to really understand what German tanks are about, which I'll get to in a second. So Tigers are all good. And actually, I'm just going to do this at the end, but I'm going to switch around and take a little break here, then I'll get back to the Tigers. So the German tanks overall are interesting because they're basically long-range snipers outside of Tier 1. But I don't really base my opinions off Tier 1 gameplay that much. They're pretty much all long-range snipers. You really don't want to get in close with German tanks. A lot of their tanks have serious issues in close range mobility. Some have really bad turret traverse, close range. Their armor isn't that great, especially in the lower tiers. The Tiger's armor, while it is formidable at range, it's not that great up front, and it has a lot of weak spots. That goes for a lot of other German tanks as well. Really, they're all best used as long-range snipers, pointing face forward at the enemy, angled just slightly though. All their tanks have insane long-range guns.